We will move now to our next session, and we have the privilege to have with us Aaron Maniam. Aaron is one of the young global leaders of the World Economic Forum, and he is also the founding director of the Center for Strategic Futures at the Prime Minister's Office in Singapore. Aaron is, for the time being, on a leave for research at Oxford University, but before he was leaving, he was the Senior Director Industry at the Ministry of Trade and Industry in Singapore, where he was responsible for coordinating economic policies, manufacturing, service, tourism sector, as well as overseeing long-time economic transformation. Aaron, we are so grateful you made the time to come here, and the floor is yours. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you. Great. Thank you very much for that kind introduction, and to all of you for being here, actually. I know it's been a long morning and quite a strenuous one at that. We've covered a huge amount of ground. So I'm going to just say for 10 seconds, would people like to stand up, stretch, reach out to the stars, just get some blood flowing? I think that might be useful.
Thank you so much.
And if you don't, that's fine. But yeah, it's looking to me like quite a number of people would quite appreciate this. So we've got a bit of an interpretive dance here. That's great. Yeah. Right. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Great. I hope that was useful. What I'm about to talk to you about has nothing to do with stretching or reaching for the stars. It has a little bit to do with what the previous panels have talked about in terms of the focus on the nation state that I think both the panels have had. Right? We've been thinking a lot about governments specifically and what public sectors at national levels can do. And I thought it would be useful just before we break for lunch to maybe consider a slightly different lens. And what I wanted to share with you was 3 assumptions that I think technology in particular helps us to break through, and 3 views about how we can respond to that. One of the assumptions, of course, is that, and this is a very simplifying assumption, is that none of the nation states actually are autarkic actors. None of them function in a vacuum. All of them are deeply interconnected. And I think what that does for us is that unlike many economic pieces of analysis, what we end up seeing is that there's a huge amount of interconnectedness out there. Right? Interconnectedness in the sense that there is a huge general equilibrium that we need to try and understand. Not just individual partial equilibriums that each state might have, but an overall equilibrium that we need to really give some attention to. The second thing that I think is really important that technology is changing for us is that we're no longer dealing with easily static equilibria. I remember one of my career mentors back home, Peter Ho, who actually set up the Center for Strategic Futures that both Jeanette and I have talked about. He used to say to us, there's no such thing as a steady state. Even though, as policymakers in particular, we love the idea of a steady state. Right? We love to think, when everything works out, when ceteris is paribus, when everything is as it should be, then our policies will work. But there's no such thing as steady state. There is no such thing as a static equilibrium. There is only constant emergence, new facts, new data, new information, new actors. And all of those are things we need to constantly adjust to. One way of thinking about this is that the world we live in is extremely complex. It's a living ecology that is constantly adapting, and not merely a complicated world, one that can be researched and understood, perhaps with great difficulty, but nonetheless can be researched and understood with human knowledge. And finally, I thought it was really important to mention this. Ian Bremmer in his opening video talked about the data revolution and the information revolution. And Jeanette in her remarks talked about the increasing abundance that we face and not just the scarcities that are involved in policy making. And I'd like to extend those ideas a bit, because what I think is really crucial in a world that is characterized by big, giant, enormous data is that we're not even dealing with pure abundance. We're dealing with generativity. Abundance would suggest that there's lots of something out there, it's not scarce, and we therefore have a lot of it. We can use it. But generativity with data suggests that the more we use it, the more we have. The more knowledge, the more information we will create. And I think this is important because we're living in a world where not just data, but relationships are generative. Relationships in the sense that all of us are connected. And the more we use that connection, that trust, that network, the more information, the more social capital we can actually create. So I think we're dealing with a world of generativity, at least that's the word I like to use, not just a world of data revolution or information revolution. And the big question then is, what does all that mean for us? What does interconnectedness and emergence and generativity mean for a world in which we need to make policy? The traditional response to a lot of this has been that, well, the state will take care of things. Right? The state takes care of providing public order, providing regulation, and providing all the public goods that no one else has an incentive to provide. This is the traditional Hobbesian core economic theory stuff that you will see. Right? Any chapter in any economics textbook, there'll be one chapter at least that deals with the fact that the public sector provides the public goods that the private sector cannot. And then we think about it a bit and we realize, oh, but states actually fail us all the time. Right? There are faltering or failed or failing states. And so we need markets as well. Right? We need the price signals of demand and supply, we need incentives, and those can actually help us in very deep and profound ways to counter some of the faults and the foibles of the state system. And that's important as well. And these have been around for centuries. What I wanted to suggest is that in this new geopolitics that we're about to be faced with, or that we are already starting to be faced with, we need to start considering another set of actors that we've only considered at the margins before. And that's what this last side of the triangle is about. That vertex is important to provide balance in this system. And that's the vertex of communities. Communities which provide very local, very specific knowledge and help us to deal with some of the resources that traditionally we're not able to deal with. Now, I think this is important. Now, I want to stress here, right? I'm not suggesting that nation states are going to be irrelevant, because then the whole of the previous panel was for naught, right? So I'm not suggesting that, right? I love what the previous panel said. I think it was critical, extremely important, but nation states by themselves, and even nation states plus markets, are not enough to help us understand everything about the world and all the complexities and nuances that are involved. So I think communities are important. And in particular, communities are important for this category of goods that we like to call common pool resources. So here I want to talk a little bit about the lovely lady on the right here. She very sadly passed away a few years ago. Anyone recognize her? Some do, some tentative hands. All right. So that's Elinor Ostrom, the only woman and the only non-economist to have ever won the Nobel Prize for Economics. One of my intellectual heroes. And the reason I think she's a great hero is because she helped us realize that when we look at goods like fisheries and forests, things that are finite but nonetheless non-excludable, which we can't stop people from coming and using, actually the state and the market don't achieve optimal outcomes. What does achieve optimal outcomes is communities self-organizing, coming together and figuring out that, you know what, when you catch a salmon that's below a certain size, throw it back into the ocean so that the fisheries replenish themselves. Don't cut down trees of a certain size. And if you do, we as a community will sanction you. Right? That's communities coming together in ways that the state and the market cannot do, and that provide local, specific, detailed, granular, and particular knowledge that actually cannot be done at the very macro level of the state. So I think Lynn Ostrom's work is quite critical for us because she reminds us that communities have a role, right? That last part of the triangle is important. The other part of this slide, which I also wanted to spend a bit of time on, is an example of communities coming together in Singapore. And this was actually a process that we initiated in 2012 called the Singapore Conversation. And here I want to acknowledge what Duncan said earlier about foresight being a participatory sport. This was foresight as a participatory sport. It was thousands of citizens coming together, answering the question, what do you want to see in your country in 2025? And this was back in 2012, so it was a good 12 to 13 years ahead that they were looking. And there were all sorts of answers that we got, right? What was very telling is that when you harness that strength of the community, the government began to see through a very different lens. We saw what people wanted, and not just what individuals in policy-making positions actually wanted. And we realized that people were concerned about identity issues. We realized that people were concerned about healthcare and the provision of housing. But we also realized that underneath all of that, they cared about the connections and the trust and the relationships that they had with other citizens. And I think that's an important thing to remember, because when we listen to those voices, we hear something that the state and the market alone cannot provide. And I wanted to stress two other things that I think communities can help us do. I promised the organizers that I wouldn't speak for more than about 10 minutes today, because I'm hoping we can leave some time for questions and pushback, not just from the previous panel, but hopefully from everybody else, right? Because we are talking about more than the nation state here. But what's happening, I think, is that when we deal with communities, we also have a space for small-scale experiments. And those are important, because when we're dealing with technology as we do these days, right, whether it's artificial intelligence or the genetic kind of revolution that we dealt with 10 years ago, what we always need is small-scale experiments that allow us to understand the phenomenon a lot better. There's no point us as policymakers staring at an issue and hoping that somehow analytic genius will hit us and we will hit on the right answer. That's not going to happen. We have to try. We have to make mistakes, we have to fail, we have to do micro-experiments in pilots before we expand those elsewhere. And those are particularly well handled when we have support from communities, because they allow us, I think, to harness local knowledge in ways that we may not be able to do at the macro level. Some of you might be thinking, oh, but this is all very hard. I have enough work to do. Right? I'm stressed enough, I can't be reaching out to communities as well. I have no time, I don't have the resources. Funny thing is, we have the resources. There are plenty of digital technologies that actually allow us to reach out to new communities, and that's why I wanted to mention what I call the digital commons. Right? Technologies that allow us actually to reach lots of people without having to scale and gathering all of them in a physical space. Sometimes we fetishize scale a great deal, I think. But what digital technology allows us to do is actually achieve community involvement at scale without physicality. We bring people together in ways that were previously not allowed for in an easy or efficient way, because we actually achieve more reach, more space, more scope through the use of these technologies. So I think when we think about technology, it's not only that it creates new problems for us, but also new opportunities. And what I'm hoping that we'll be able to see as we move along is that even as we talk about large experiments of pooled sovereignty, we also consider the individual autonomous sovereignties that exist within that, right? The people, the human beings that we're trying to affect and that we're trying to improve lives for as people who make some kind of policy. I'll leave it there, and I hope that we can talk a little bit more about the triangle and where else it can take us in the next few years. Thank you. Okay, in the spirit of community management, I shall take my own questions. Do we have any? All right, we've one from Angela and one here. Let's take Angela's first and the one here. Yeah. And I might take 3 maybe at a time so that we can cover a bit more ground. That's fine. You shouted at me before, so that's okay. Yeah. But only in the best possible. Yeah.
No, just on the triangle,
yeah.
Right? You put digital commons down under community. And yet, in the rooms today, we've heard this discussion about the concern about digital monopoly by the private sector. So my question is digital commons in a corner, or should it be in the center?
Love that. Thank you. You had a question? Yeah.
I had a question about the communities aspect you mentioned, which is how do you identify the communities that have a tipping point effect, so that are not just in a corner, but that have a transformational effect?
Okay, great. One more? Is there any other question? That was a hand holding up the mic. Okay, well, let me take those 2 first, and then we can see if there are any others. So Angela's question was about why digital commons was put in that corner under communities, and should it actually be in the center? You know, I think you're right, Angela. I put it there because I thought of commons as, in particular, a tool that helps us to reach out to communities. But if we think about it, the digital revolution is affecting every aspect of our lives, not just the community or citizen-led aspects. They potentially can change government, but sometimes for better and perhaps for worse as well, right? There are potentials for better outreach, for better service delivery at the governance level, but there's also the potential for greater surveillance. There's also the potential for surveillance, right? Surveillance of all of us by ourselves, whether we like that or not. And then there's also the kind of change that exists in the private sector. So maybe it's not even the case that you need digital commons at the center of the triangle, but really that there's a much larger space which is defined by digitalization, within which that triangle actually works. So thank you. I will change the slides for whenever we use these next time, because these things should be adaptive and experimental as we go along. So that's great, I think. This question about communities and how we identify them. So to be honest, there are some things that we can know ex ante. Right, and we can maybe either analyze or look at them and say, yes, I think this community is going to work. But the funny thing about communities is, I think they surprise us. Sometimes the ones we expect to have huge amounts of multiplier effects will end up being fairly dead, actually. We'll go meet them, we might have these large citizen juries or big deliberative exercises, and we find that actually all they've said to us is what we already know. And then another community, we might feel, oh, and I don't think we'll get much out of these guys. But you go there and then you realize actually there's a huge amount of insight that comes. So I wouldn't try and ex ante identify all of them. What I think is much more useful is trying to just have a fairly random selection of a few different communities and be open to the fact that actually there can be insight from a whole range of them. Where I would start though, because you do have to start somewhere, right? And we don't have the luxury of just meeting everybody in this deliberative sort of process. But where I would start is with the immediate end users of a particular policy. Those need to be the ones who we talk to, and we need to ask them, what have you been happiest about in the last few years in the work that we've provided for you, and what have been your deepest pain points? Just those two questions alone. So don't ask them what the policy should be. Just ask them about their own experiences. What has really irritated you, and what have you been really happy about? And it's amazing how generative those questions can be, because what they tell us will tell us what we need to preserve, as well as what we need to change or modify or refine. Yeah. A couple more questions? Yes.
Hi, I'm Ramona Gabor from the Young Talents Network in ESPAS. We heard you before, and it's always very inspiring. I wanted to ask you, are you not a bit afraid of, let's say, a community takeover? Like we talk about artificial intelligence takeover. Are you not afraid that if community sort of self-governance, let's say, proves better than central governance, it will take over and it would lead to even more fragmentation, because we always hear that European member states are too small to have any role by themselves. So that's why it's important to stick together. So how about even more fragmentation versus that?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. Thank you. One last one. Jeanette? Yeah. There was no favoritism. There was no one.
I cannot resist the temptation to go after my former boss.
Oh,
okay,
no.
I'm going to switch tracks a little bit, go back to the assumptions of interconnectedness and emergence.
Yeah.
If we think about those things, how they affect general equilibrium, but also the time scale at which this happens, especially in a geopolitics sense, how do we convince policymakers to keep paying attention as the change is happening? It's happening at a snail's pace compared to policy work. How do we get them to pay attention?
Great. One last one. Anyone else? Alan, yeah. Sorry, the mic keeps moving around, but yeah.
Yes, thank you very much, Aaron. Although at the beginning of your talk you did say that you very much appreciated the previous panel and you weren't at all saying something that was contradicting, I'm still finding it quite hard actually to sort of place what you're saying against what we heard before on with the geopolitical, geostrategic side, because in a way what this traditional politics tells us or assumes is there a kind of the geo side of it, if you like. There are spaces that are distinct and that are pushing against each other and that are, they're working sometimes together, but very often pushing against each other, and there are barriers between all of your words of emergence, interconnectedness, even or particularly generativity. They imply a space that's not bounded in the same way. So these are very, very different concepts. And I was trying to find a way, and I saw that Dimitri Trenin is still here. You said something that intrigued me, which I've thought of asking you before. You said something like the rivalries between the great powers, one of the differences in the future, they might be decided not on the battlefields, but at home. I wasn't quite sure what you meant there, and I wondered if that was kind of a connecting point. These communities
I'm going to have to ask you to
that are growing,
move to the question quickly.
It's there. These communities that are growing, are they what you understood, Dimitri, to mean by the home? Is the home space, the community space, actually becoming a bigger space, a more important one?
Okay, great. Those are all wonderful questions. Let me take Alan's first, actually, because it will link to your question. Ramona, right? Is that right? Yeah. This thing about contradictions, first of all, I would say that one of my greatest favorite quotes ever is from the novelist F. Scott Fitzgerald, who says that the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing thoughts and continue to function. We should just hold two opposing thoughts, actually, and try and continue to function where we can. Because I think there are some, apparent paradoxes, but actually it is possible to hold the fact that the state continues to have a strong role and allow for the possibility that communities can actually play rich and diverse functions in what we're trying to do. So this actually brings me to my response to Ramona, because, am I afraid of community takeover? Potentially. One of my ministers at home likes to say that when you open the windows, the flies will come in, especially if it's summer in Europe, I think. And it's true, they will, right? But the question is, how do you manage the overall infrastructure in ways that minimize the flies coming in and that allow you to respond quickly when the flies are there? And I think that's where the state's role continues to be critical, right? The state sets rules in place, it builds a certain amount of infrastructure, it decides what the boundaries are for relevant resources or not, and sometimes communities will need the role of the state to complement what they're trying to do. If communities want to sanction people in response, say, to irresponsible use of the internet, they will probably use legal regimes rather than try and do it all on their own. Right? So I'm not talking about pure self-organizing, everybody hold hands and sing Kumbaya here. Right? There's a lot of situations in which the state is a complement to communities, and that's why the triangle is important. These are not three separate lines, right, but three things that intersect and kind of interdependently work alongside one another. And I think that, Alan, helps me to figure out that the fact that there isn't necessarily a contradiction, and there can be actually a kind of complementarity between the two roles, including in what Dimitri mentioned, around the ideas of things that are decided at home. Because I suspect states that have strong roles for communities, that allow their communities to buy into national identities and policies that they help create, those are the states with mandates, right, that actually allow themselves much greater dexterity and freedom when they're operating in the geopolitical sphere. Jeanette, your question about interconnections, emergence, and time scale. I actually think you answered that question in your own remarks earlier when you talked about the drip feed process of feeding information to our decision makers. I am a big fan of this. I know there's a video happening here, so this is probably going to get captured and will get fed back to me at some point in a dangerous way. But I believe that the role that we play is not always to convince, because convincing means we play this analytic hardball with our bosses, right? It's like, please be convinced now by what I am saying to you, by the deep brilliance or the data that I'm showing you. But what if I'm not trying to convince you? What if I merely need to socialize you? I send you one article today about something that's happening. And then I send you another article. And then I suggest you go to a conference with me. And then I bring in a guest and have them speak to you for an hour. And then slowly all of this accumulates into a clock speed of change that actually allows for deep transformation. It takes patience. It takes keeping the end goal in mind all the time. But it is possible. It also sounds deeply manipulative, I know. But it's about understanding the ethnographics and the psychology of power, right? People who don't have time will need us to help curate the experiences that they have. And I think, therefore, I am assuming that all of us are motivated at least by some level of virtuous aims. If we are not, then everything I've just said can be actually put to very nefarious purposes. And I will hope that they are not, just in the hope that we actually end up with far better outcomes than the bad ones. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Thank you for a very lively presentation, for your inspiring thinking, and for pushing us to see the truly transformative potential of communities. Thank you so much for making the time. I was told that this convenes our morning session. I would like to thank all our speakers, and especially you in the audience, first for your patience and your active contributions, and second, for now moving to the third floor where lunch will be served, and for somehow taking note of the fact that we will reconvene at 2 o'clock sharp. Thank you very much.